Hi, and welcome to this podcast of The Everyday Editor. My name is John Crossman, and thanks for watching. Today we're going to talk about the second phase in the video production process or cycle, and that is the actual production part. There's pre-production, production, and post-production. Post-production, of course, is where the editing and the finalization of a project happens. But production, I've expanded the idea a little bit to basically gathering all of the assets you're going to need for the final video production. Now, when most people think of video production or movie production, they think of someone speaking into a camera, someone shooting a camera, and that may very well be, 80 to 100% of what the production ends up being. But there are other things that we're going to talk about with production. Production is going to be one of the most expensive parts of your project. And so here's some basic guidelines. Usually a production day, cameramen, sound people, probably hair and makeup, other associated things like a teleprompter operator, they will have a day rate. When someone quotes you a day rate where I do production, that usually means a 10-hour day. Doesn't mean you have to use all 10 hours, and it doesn't mean if you end up with only using 8 hours, you get a rebate. The day rate will cover up to 10 hours. But you're basically taking that person, away from any other possibility to earn their living that day, so that's the day rate. Any hours over 10 would be paid at time and a half. So, in my area currently, I did a project a couple months ago, and shooters were going for $750 to $800 for a day. Sound people were going from $850 to $1,200 a day. The difference in many cases with sound people is they will have their own gear. Now, if you're hiring a shooter and they also have their own gear, and it's the gear that you want, say 4K or whatever, then you probably are going to be up there in that $1,200 a day rate as well. So hair and makeup and those kind of things I know much less about. I have used teleprompters on shoots and whatnot, and their day rate was a little bit less than a shooter, but of course they've got equipment. It's got to be mounted to the tripod where the camera is, and so they've got some investment in gear as well. So that's what a production day is. That's their day rates. Some people will offer, or many times clients will ask for, well, can you give me a half day rate? And I mean, I've done it. I think everyone has probably done it. But I've come to believe over the 40 years in the business that half day rates are just inherently unfair, because much of your time, even in a half day, is spent, getting there and prepping for the shoot. And then the shooting probably isn't going to be, 4 hours or 5 hours if you're thinking of a 10-hour production day. But when the shoot is done, then the gear has to be, packed back up safely, and the memory cards that you use to capture have to be taken care of. Sometimes they're dumped right there. If they're not, then they're given to the producer, and they need to make sure that they take care of them. If it were me, I would check in the field that, you were getting picture and sound. I've heard some horror stories. One of my good friends who's a shooter had a day with Dr. Phil on a remote here in our area, and shot all day, only to find out at the end of the day that even though he was monitoring the audio, it actually wasn't being fed to his camera. So, and I don't know if the audio guy didn't have a mixer that could record audio, but needless to say, a whole day with Dr. Phil was a pretty good gig until, Dr. Phil's producer found out that they had an image, but they had zero sound. So the audio guy really screwed up, and that was a big hassle. That guy's never going to have the opportunity to work for Dr. Phil again. So that was too bad. But that can happen. So you want to make sure that you've got a knowledgeable crew going in, and that's what you're going to end up paying for it. The last thing to consider is when you're hiring a crew, if you're local and you're staying local, then that's one thing. If you are traveling, then of course you have the cost of bringing the crew wherever they need to go. With the educational company, we shot all over the country, and so we would literally meet, Monday morning at the airport and fly anywhere from a couple hours to all day to get to where we were going to shoot. That's considered a travel day, and so that's half day rate. Now, we did a lot of shooting over the course of time in Detroit. So from where I live, that's a 2.5 hour flight. And so if we left at 7 in the morning, we'd be there by noon, after shuffling through airports and whatnot. And school goes until 3:30, so we could go and hit a school. And so then we were shooting and flying. Now, even though you're not going to shoot for a full day, the fact that you're shooting on the same day you're flying turns that into a full day rate. So something to consider. Out west, there's big distances. If a crew has to drive from here to Idaho or here to Las Vegas or whatever to shoot, then if all they do is drive for that day, you're going to have to pay them, but you pay them at half rate. If they drive and shoot, then you're going to be paying a full day rate, even though half the day might have been travel. So things to keep in mind of how it works, at least where I live and work. All of these things are going to be a little different depending on what part of the country you live in. If you live on the coasts or in Dallas or in Chicago, you probably are going to pay a little bit more. If you don't live in one of those places, you might pay a little bit less. But another cost to consider in production is, of course, you've got a crew. If you're going to be out over lunch, then you've got to provide a meal. A lot of crews that I'm on will have, kind of like a snack box that the producer brings along, energy bars and stuff like that, so that people can get a pick-me-up when they need it. Water is important. In the education company where we were hiring crews all the time, everyone on the crew had a per diem, which is basically money that the company would provide for them to cover their meals. Now, typically, we'd stay at a hotel that had breakfast, so breakfast was covered. If you were on the crew and could convince the producer to still stop at McDonald's, then, that came out of your per diem. Lunch would be part of your per diem, and then, of course, dinner would be part of your per diem. Now, I was on a lot of long days with this company, especially towards the end, although that had nothing to do with it. It just happened to be the producer we were working for, where I was shooting, and it would be not unusual to be up and dressed and have our gear with us in the lobby of the hotel at 7 in the morning. And then we would drive to the first school of the day. So if you got down there too late to have breakfast at the hotel, then you didn't have breakfast. We would shoot till 11:30 or noon, pack back up, pack back into the van, and then we would drive to the next location, which could be 15 minutes away or could be an hour away. And if we could, we would stop, go through a drive-through and get lunch. There were many days, not every day, but there were many days where we couldn't do that. So, that's when the snack box in the van is very helpful. You can at least have a energy bar to help power you up for the afternoon. and a water. And then we would go and set up and shoot all afternoon. School's over at 3:30, which is the time that we could then talk to teachers without interrupting their class schedule. We could talk with administrators. And then when that was done, say 4:30 or 5, we would go to the district office, and from 5 o'clock until sometimes 11 o'clock at night, we would interview the district people about, whatever we were covering at the time, whether it was a specific program they were implementing or how it was generally going. It was a unique kind of project, but we had days like that. So we wouldn't get back to the hotel till, after 11. Maybe we would break at 9 o'clock at night, and the producer would take us to dinner before we went back to the hotel. They weren't awful, but they were some long, long days. And so that's kind of the range of production. There's other production. I know that some people, I have not done this kind of production, but, if they're set up to do production for an event, say, they might set up their camera the first day and get paid for a day to basically set up their camera, run cables, make sure that everything is working. Then they come back the next day and they actually shoot the event. And the event may be 2 or 3 days, so they'll shoot for 2 or 3 days, get their day rate. And then when they're done at the end of the day, or at the end of the shoot on their 3rd or 4th day, then, there's a couple hours to break the camera down, the tripod down, get things packed up the way that the production company wants them, loaded back in the truck and ready for the next gig. So that's a lot of work at the beginning and the end, and the middle is still work, especially if you do it well, but not as intense, a couple of days in the middle there. And they're getting their day rate for the 4 days, so it's a good gig for them. The reason why, the day rates are also high is that, these are freelancers and they don't work every day. And so you're basically paying for the days that you use them and a little bit of time when no one's using them. And if they're really busy freelancers, then they can, do really well. But in general, things ebb and flow, and, we kept a lot of freelancers busy at our education company, but that company's gone now, so it didn't really matter what we paid them when we were, shooting, sending out a crew every week for 3 years. Now we're not sending out any crews, so that's a little bit why you pay the premium over what you would pay an in-house person. And we actually did study if it would be cheaper, because there was one point where we were doing just a ton of production, both in Michigan and in Kentucky. We were sending crews every week, and a production trip for that company, airfare, hotels, and 2 cameras and sound, it was easily a $10,000 week, just in hard costs. And so we looked at would it be cheaper to just hire a photographer and have them as an employee? And when we really did the numbers and looked at over the course of a year how many days we actually used a shooter, it didn't make economic sense. Even though it was expensive to hire a shooter at a day rate, it was still cheaper than hiring them full-time, paying them a competitive wage plus benefits and all the other stuff that goes with hiring employees. So something to keep in mind. The other part of production, and I call it, there's content that is generated, which is what I would call stuff that is shot. And then there's content that is collected. And content that's collected would be making sure you've got the company logo, you've got the company style guide. Maybe it involves, if you're doing a history or historical piece of any kind, there's going to be images that you need for the final edit. I prefer, if at all possible, to actually get those images and scan them on a flatbed scanner. the resolution is going to be far better than even a good video camera is going to get, and it allows you as an editor to work easily with the images. I have producer clients who will literally open a scrapbook on a soft, someone's living room chair and shoot that and expect those pictures to show up in the piece. And I have to do sometimes a lot of work on every single picture because they're not on an easel. They're slumped into a chair, so they're going to be crooked. They're not going to be square to the frame of the camera. They're going to be, what's the word for it? Keystoned, where they're either the leading edge or the bottom edge is going to be not parallel to the top edge. And so I can fix all that, and I have to fix them to be able to use them the way a normal person would expect to see a picture on a video at the end of the day. So that involves a lot more work in editing. So whenever there are files that need to be collected, I put that under the production banner as well, because as a producer of a piece, you're not only hiring the crew and going out and shooting what you want shot, but if there are images, if there are other assets that need to be included, you need to have those to give them to the editor when it's time to do the post-production. So a slight expansion of the idea of production, but that's what I've come to consider the production phase of the video production process. So that's pre-production and production. In the next podcast, I'll talk about post-production and try to keep it short. That's where I've spent my career, so there's lots of stories and things to cover, but we'll go through the basics. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the editing room floor.